How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another 15-minute time limit from your friend, the Ring Generals. Specifically, I'm Nick Nenad, and I'm going to be doing today's 15-minute time limit. I'm going to be talking about the fights that happened March 16th, 2019. That is a Saturday. I'm going to be specifically talking about UFC Fight Night, Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal, and Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia in the boxing ring. That fight happened at AT&T Stadium. The Darren Till Jorge Masvidal fight happened in London, England, on Darren Till's home turf. I want to talk about Errol Spence Jr. and Mikey Garcia because that is the fight that happened the latest to win. You're going to more than likely be watching this video. So I'm going to dive into that first. This fight was a domination from Errol Spence Jr. from the get-go. I only had Mikey Garcia winning one round in this fight, and I personally believed that Errol Spence Jr. Could have won every single round, and actually the judges did believe that he won all 12 rounds. I believe the final score from the judges officially was 120 to 107. So do the math and figure it out. But that is total domination. A couple 10-8 rounds there if you try to calculate it that way. Looking more analytically at this fight, Errol Spence Jr. he landed 345 punches to the 75 punches that Mikey Garcia landed. And then looking at power punches, 237 by Errol Spence Jr. compared to 54 by Mikey Garcia. And what really impressed me about Errol Spence Jr.'s performance in this fight was that his game plan was perfect. He would go to the body and then he'd go hard shots to the head. He would not let Mikey Garcia get anywhere close to him, and that's Mikey Garcia's go-to. And I think Lennox Lewis also mentioned on this fight, and if it wasn't Lennox Lewis, it was one of the other boxing announcers for this fight. They mentioned that it is extremely difficult for a guy with a hard left hook, a big left hook like Mikey Garcia, to execute that punch on a southpaw, and especially on a southpaw as good as Errol Spence Jr. And he just was unable to ever adjust to what Spence was doing in this fight. And another thing that really impressed me about this, it was Errol Spence Jr. came in and really, once it was about the 6th, 7th, 8th round, people started to realize that Mikey Garcia was going to really have to do something special. He was going to have at least a couple of 10-8 rounds and probably have to knock out Errol Spence Jr. in order to win this fight. Because like I mentioned, the judges had this 7-0, 8-0, 6-0 because they had him win every single round. So it was domination from Errol Spence, and Mikey Garcia needed to do something. And instead of Garcia performing better and Garcia landing more punches and being more aggressive, Errol Spence Jr. got more aggressive, and he started to land just some bombs. I believe it was Mikey Garcia's brother that almost threw in the towel after the 9th round and gave his brother one more round to prove that he could actually last in this fight, because he didn't want to see his brother get knocked the hell out, because it sure did look like a couple of times Errol Spence Jr. was going to knock him out. And like I said, so perfect game plan here from Spence Jr. I think the only thing that he'd be mad at is that he didn't knock out Mikey Garcia. But nonetheless, he retains his IBF championship that he had. I forget if it's welterweight or lightweight. Please correct me in the comments if you know exactly what it is. I'm sure I'll look it up right after the podcast is done, or right after this recording is done, so it won't matter. But so now we're likely going to get Errol Spence Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao, and I'm really excited about this fight because Manny Pacquiao's last performance against Adrian Broner was very similar to what Errol Spence Jr. did to Mikey Garcia. Total domination. And whatever Adrian Broner wants to say about what he thought about that fight, Manny Pacquiao dominated him and beat the crap out of him in that fight and dominated almost every single round. So Very similar to what Errol Spence Jr. did. So you have a super fight here. And Errol Spence Jr. is now 25-0. Manny Pacquiao obviously is a legend, and with that last performance and even the performance before that, really showed that he can still box with the best of the best. If I had to make a super early prediction on this fight, I would just think Errol Spence Jr., the younger guy, would more than likely win this fight. I believe Errol Spence Jr. is only 29 years old, so right in the prime of his career. And I would expect that fight to happen sometime in the fall or winter, because you don't want to stack too many big boxing matches in a row. You want to keep them special, and especially where boxing is right now, where I believe the UFC is a bit ahead of it as far as not only talent but just viewership and interest. I think instead of putting on like fights every month or every couple weeks, or in the UFC's case, every single week, boxing, you can go about a couple months per huge fight, but every fight has to be huge. Of course, you can have these ESPN cards where you show off Lomachenko, or you have these premier boxing championship fights where you show off like the Charlo brothers and stuff like that. But you do need these big fights like Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. This fight, Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia, a Manny Pacquiao fight versus Adrian Broner. These all need to be spread out at different times. So boxing does usually do a good job of that, and we will see what they do with this one. But so the next fight's going to be Errol Spence Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao. They agreed in the ring, kind of, for this fight. Errol Spence Jr. brought him over in the post-fight press conference, and they were very, very cordial toward each other. So there'd be a lot of respect in that fight. If it happened. But so long story short, Errol Spence Jr. gets a dominating win in a huge fight at AT&T Stadium, where the Cowboys play, his hometown, at the stadium where his favorite NFL team plays. So he gets a big win, and for Mikey Garcia, he'll likely move down in weight because he moved up in weight for this fight. So he will now move on and fight another willing contender, because he's 39-1, and he's still an exceptional talent. So nothing to be ashamed of. You messed up the game plan. Errol Spence Jr. was the better fighter, and you just got to move on. So Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia was a little bit disappointing, but nonetheless, it still was a big fight. All right, moving on to UFC Fight Night. Excuse me one second. Sorry about that. Moving on to UFC Fight Night, Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal. This fight was projected to be a very big fight, because in the welterweight division, there are so many great fighters that we're still looking for number one contenders. And obviously, we have Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman, which is the expected welterweight championship fight. But Jorge Masvidal and Darren Till are both right kind of below those two, and some could say they are both legitimate contenders before this fight happened for Kamaru Usman's championship. And so coming in this fight, it's in Darren Till's hometown. Darren Till's the 24-year-old stud. He's facing a 34-year-old veteran in Jorge Masvidal. And you look at it like, okay, Darren Till should probably win this fight, right? It's in his hometown. And when he walked out, it was amazing. He walked out to Sweet Caroline. The entire arena, the O2 Arena in London, was chanting and cheering in unison almost. Sweet Caroline. Darren Till was really, really pumped up for this fight. He was excited. He was jumping around. The crowd was really behind him. They booed Jorge. They vehemently is the wrong word. They just encouragingly cheered Darren Till, gave him a rousing ovation. And this fight lived up to the hype, at least what the crowd was projecting, because it starts off, Jorge Masvidal throws a crazy running kick and kicks Darren Till right in the nuts. There's no other way to play it. He kicks him right in the nuts. But there's a lot of respect between these guys. The fight moves on. Masvidal likely lost points for that. But then nonetheless, Darren Till came out and laid in a hard left hand, a big bomb. He knocks Jorge Masvidal to the ground. Doesn't end the fight, but he dominates that first round. And it's looking like Darren Till is winning this fight. But Jorge, Masvidal had a couple of good strikes and a couple of good moments in the first round, so it wasn't complete domination. So you weren't expecting like a second round knockout from Darren Till or anything like that. You were excited to see where this fight was going to go. It is 5 rounds because it was a main event, so it was exciting. And then we get to the second round, and Masvidal's putting it on Darren Till. He's starting to dominate, and now it's starting to look like an even fight, and it's looking like Masvidal kind of felt him out in that first round. Obviously, you don't want to get knocked on your ass, but nonetheless, he was feeling him out, and now he's dominating that second round. Excuse me while I get my notes real quick on this fight. I'm on my phone right here. So you're looking at this, and you're like, this is a really, really good fight. And then Darren Till accidentally pokes Jorge Masvidal in the eye. Again, great respect between the two. It wasn't a on purpose eye poke. Darren Till was trying to throw a right hand, and he had opened his hand. So he pegs him in the eye. Nothing big there. Darren Till likely lost points on it. Darren Till's losing this round, and all of a sudden, Jorge Masvidal lays in a bomb and knocks Darren Till unconscious. I forget if it was the left or right, but he lays in a bomb, and Darren Till, you can see him go out, fall straight back. Masvidal lays in a left hand on the way down. Darren Till's head bounces off the canvas. Masvidal finishes off with one more punch. Ref comes in, and it's over. Jorge Masvidal upsets and shocks the world by beating Darren Till in his hometown. In his post-fight press conference, he did call out that he wanted to fight for the championship. I don't see that happening. I likely see Jorge Masvidal facing Ben Askren. That's kind of what this fight was projected to also be. You're showing great welterweight contenders, but more than likely Ben Askren was going to fight these two. And Ben Askren was in London the entire time, and he was even doing stuff for the UFC, and so likely Jorge Masvidal now faces Ben Askren in kind of a number one contenders fight. And so that should be super exciting. Ben Askren had a crazy fight against Robbie Lawler, and some could say that fight kind of has unfinished business with it because Robbie Lawler really wasn't choked out like the referee thought he was. But so Ben Askren faces another worthy component in Jorge Masvidal, a couple old folk getting in the ring and duking it out. So that should be a good fight. As far as for Darren Till, Till's 24 years old, and he was just knocked out. Right, this wasn't like a domination knockout. It was one punch, was laid in there. He was knocked unconscious, nothing he could do, and so he has to move on. He's only 24. He has a country behind him, so I'm very excited to see where Darren Till goes with this. But nonetheless, he gets knocked out, so he's got to do something. Maybe he faces Tyron Woodley again. Maybe he faces the loser of the Kamaru Usman Colby Covington fight. We will see, but Darren Till, much like Mikey Garcia, are going to have to come out and be world beaters in the next fight, and are going to really, really have to impress people like me and people like Dana White in order for him to get another title shot. But he's only 24 years old. He's got all the world behind him, and so it's going to be exciting. But interesting fights tonight. Obviously, the Errol Spence Jr. fight was domination. So if you enjoy a fighter putting on a show, you liked it. If you don't, like I do, and you don't like dominating fights, and you like it to be back and forth, then I didn't enjoy that fight very much. But if you look at the UFC Fight Night fight, that was a great fight. And if that would have gone 5 rounds, it would have been one of the best fights in UFC this year. It didn't, because Jorge Masvidal knocked Darren Till unconscious. So we'll see where all of these guys go from here. I got about 1 minute left here on this 15-minute time limit, so I'm just going to promote some of the stuff that the Ring Generals have been doing. Always check out Eric Santos' video game streams. He usually does, he plays UFC 3 or WWE 2K19 and mimics fights that are currently happening. I expect him to do maybe a Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier fight coming up in the near distance. And, of course, he'll be doing a lot of the WrestleMania fights. So check out those. He does a lot of those. Those are on the Ring General site. And, then, of course, check out our last podcast. Our last full Ring Generals podcast is called Rapid Mania. We talk about a lot of the WrestleMania storylines like Kofi Kingston, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte. And a lot of other stuff, including what happened on Raw and SmackDown Live this past week. So go check that out. That was just released yesterday. I'm going to be releasing this obviously tonight. That doesn't matter. As far as my social media goes, I'm at Nick Nenad, lowercase on everything but Snapchat. On Snapchat, I'm at Nick_Nenad. And then, of course, I do the Cover 2 podcast every Wednesday at 9 a.m. That's sports, though, so you don't have to listen to that if you don't want to. This is the Ring Generals page. But this has been the 15-minute time limit. Sorry to screw that up. See you guys.